Natalie from Parasoft. Thanks very much, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you so much for hosting us today. Today, we're going to speak about RecXpress and the rules and why they're there for you, because we've found, that let me actually just restart, because let me actually introduce who's with me. It's me, Natalie, and then I've got Azakiwe, who has joined, and Wayne in the background here to answer all your questions. Okay, so today what we're going to discuss is RecXpress and the rules. Now, RecXpress and the rules are there for you to automate your client's bank recon to the point where they do not have to do anything. All they want is to import, check certain things, and then post, and that's the end. RecXpress rules completely remove any interaction with their data as possible. Okay, so let's discuss the power of RecXpress and using the rules. There are many bank transactions that aren't entered into bank services when you bring in your bank statement. For example, bank charges, interest, stop orders, etc. Now, when you import these transactions, RecXpress recognizes them as no match entries. If you have created all the necessary rules, RecXpress will then be able to automatically add them to bank services. RecXpress will allow you to create rules that identify the transactions that are not matched based on its transaction code or its actual reference. Now, once you have defined these rules, and you can define an unlimited amount of rules, RecXpress will fully automate the reconciliation process and have no user intervention necessary when doing your import. And that is the main objective of RecXpress. Total automation, no user errors, and a complete reconciliation in a matter of minutes, not days. Okay, Az is going to give us a bit of an explanation here on creating a template.
Creating a template, where do you start? And at what point do you set up your rules? And where do you go from here? The user gives you a bank format, which you then give to Parasoft, and we create the ability for you to import that bank statement. When we do that, we also create transaction codes that are attached to the bank statement, and those transaction codes are categorized into 9 different categories. For example, your bank charges, interest, etc. Those 9 transaction codes are the basis of the first rules that we create automatically for your client. As you use the product, you will continue to customize these categories and rules so you are able to define better rules for your customer until it is got for just about every single transaction that comes from your bank statement. You do understand, you start with a skeleton that gives you the basic rules that are required, and that is the starting point for your client.
And I think what's really important to highlight here is that with RecXpress for bank services, Parasoft does supply you with sample data, and in that sample data, there's what we use is the NetBank business format, and we have already created a rules template for you called sample. And there you can see a really great example of what's in a rules template and what it contains. The reason why we use NetBank is because it has about 200 transaction codes. So it is really useful to kind of give you a great understanding of how powerful a template can be.
Here we have our bank format window, which has almost more than 200 formats available for all users organized by region. In this screen, we have selected the region North and South America, and on the right-hand side, we have the transaction codes for the Bank of America. Later, Nat will be showing you the NetBank format, as this is the format used in our sample data. So, for example, you can see that there's a lot of transaction codes for bank charges. We have we have received this information directly from your bank and have predefined them for you in the bank format. So in transaction codes, you can see that they have already been allocated to the different categories that they fall under. You are able to change your categories here, but we wouldn't recommend that. It will show you at the end of the training how you can move your rules how you can move your categories a bit more flexibly. We've added transaction codes, but there might be ones that the bank wants, then you can add them here yourself. When you add a new transaction code, you can put anything as the transaction code unless specified by the bank, then we recommend you use those codes. You can also make your own transaction codes that you're bringing in, and this is very useful when you're bringing a format that is a free format. Nat is now going to show you how to add your own transaction codes. Over to you, Nat.
Great. Okay, cool. So what we have here is we have some live data. Okay, and I'm going to go to the global region where I can show you, we kind of have a very simplified format, two options. We have the date amount ref transaction, and we have date ref amount. Now, using the finder in the transaction code window, I'm going to go and find this format. Okay, and I'm going to do that by just typing in date. Oh, sorry, it's organized by country, so just give me a second. Let's type in date. Let's try that again. Great, and when I double click here, there you can see I have a very minimal amount of transaction codes. But what is great about this very simple format is I can kind of build onto it. So how I'm going to do it is I'm going to insert a line, and let's put in the transaction code BC. I'm going to call it bank charges. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit that into the category bank charges. And that there is how you add your own transactions, your own transaction codes to a free format. And so this example is of how to create and build your own format using our simplified formats, date amount ref transaction or date ref amount. Sorry, before we go on, do we have any questions? No. Are we going to just put them in the chat, hey, Nancy?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so before Nat shows us how to create a template, I'm just going to say, as we mentioned, all our sample data comes standardized with a particular format and a particular template. What happens is, if you want to show the client your sample data, some of the sample data that is live, you can download our sample data, you can install it, and you can download the actual PPT that is specific to that sample data. And it gives you all the different examples in the sample data. You can go through the whole process of importing, reconciling, etc. One of the templates that we've created in our sample data is the rules template called sample. If you go to sample, it's already got the template and rules already have been created for you with GL accounts and different compare methods, which will go with you in a minute. Go through with you in a minute. Over to you, Nat.
Okay, great. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a live example of how to create your own rules template. Okay, so let me just maximize this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select new in the rules window. Okay, and let's just name it sample 1. And when I tab off, I can use the finder again to go and find the format I would like to use. Now, like as said, we use the NetBank format with our sample data. So let me just load that one. And when I select add, you're going to see all the transaction codes be added. Sometimes it's quite quick. Sometimes you just see many, many transaction codes getting added. So there you can see all the transaction codes coming in. Okay, now in this format, in this rules template, you can see that there are multiple categories. Now, why do we have categories and not transaction types? A transaction type is something like service fees or bank charges, forex charges, and they can all go under one category like bank charges. So let's go into bank charges. And there you can see there's service fee, commission bills, sun-dried charges, etc. Okay, so the reason for this is that you might want to number them by category. For example, over here where we have the auto number function, we can put this on and we can add a prefix of BK, or rather let's do BCHG. BCHG, and this multiple transaction types can now be grouped under one category where we allow you to auto number every transaction that comes in under the bank charges category, giving each transaction a unique sequence. We did this because we would get client data and the references would be something like well, not bank, maybe bank charges is actually the wrong example. Some, you know, they would, let's do deposits. I think that might be the better example. Okay, I'm not going to save that. So, oh gosh, just give me a second. Let me go and find it. Okay, there we go. This is a bit of a better example. So what we're going to do to this category is we're going to go and we're going to give it a general prefix of DEPO. Okay, so why we created this was because we once got we would often get clients' data, and you know they'd have a reference like deposit 1, and then the following month there would be deposit exclamation mark. You know, they wouldn't have unique references. So what we did was we created the auto numbering function. The renumbering function would then clean this up, and it ensures that unique references are for all payments and that you have put it in the category deposits, giving you a clean and organized bank services. We then took it one step further, where you can actually individualize it to a specific rule. So here, if we look there in the auto number column, I've set that to yes. I can then give it its own specific prefix. So let's say DP, and now each transaction can have its own prefix and pick up the next number sequence from the rules. And this will override the general default auto number up here. I think, Wayne, would you like to add anything there?
No, Natalie, I think you're explaining it perfectly. So the whole point here is to create a clearer, more identifiable reference number when this goes through to bank services, rather than some generic, like you said, standard deposit. And it will increment the numbers according to the rules. So per transaction type in the category, you can create your prefix at transaction type level and have a running number per that type of entry. Just makes the whole recon a lot easier and clearer and more accurate.
Great, thank you, Wayne. Okay, so let's go on to the next. So what we're going to discuss now is the rules. Okay, for a rule to work, sorry, Nancy, I've just got to hide my go-to meeting. There we go. Okay, for a rule to work, it needs to know what to look for. RecXpress therefore allows you to compare certain information against the imported transaction, and based on that matching, attach the rule defaults to that transaction. Now, the methods we use are as follows. The most basic rule, which is the transaction code added when creating the template, as we just showed you now. Then we get a bit more specific with the compare methods. So firstly, we have equals, which is matches if the reference is exactly equal. We then have like, which is matches if the reference contains the predefined text. And then we have the equal with a wildcard and a like with a wildcard. Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's just go deeper into each rule and see, you know, what they do and how we can utilize the power of it. Okay, so as mentioned, the transaction codes are the simplest rules. There is no need for a like command because it has the transaction code already there. We then have the equal rule, which is anything with that description must go to certain default codes. But for us, I mean, I don't see how this would be a common rule, as it's not often that you get the exact transaction reference every statement. So us personally, we don't really use this rule that much, but as you can see there, it matches to the transaction code as 080, and then it has the exact compare method of Courtyard. Now, the like rule is like this is the most used rule, and it helps to make your transactions and your rules more specific. It is the same as the contain. So I think when you saw me use a contain now, when I used the finder to find the transaction codes in the format that we were using, and what I did was anything that contained the word net, it brought up those results. That's the same for this rule. So what we have there is the transaction in 135.092-xide, and then of course with our transaction code 008. So what we've done with this rule is we've created the compare method with a like, and the compare description is xide, which means that could be your vendor or your customer, and they pay you, and they might have their invoice there, but they want to be more specific, so they include their company name. And that then helps you to make that rule specifically for xide. So the 008 is not just for one transaction, but it's for many transactions, and that is why you would use the like. So you might have you might have multiple transactions that use the transaction code 008, but you want to be more specific. And the way to do that, again, would be to use the repetitive word that is in all the references for that specific transaction type, for that specific transaction that you bring in. So you can have two rules for the same transaction code, but your compare description will be different to then differentiate to RecXpress what default values to give it. You then have the equal with a wildcard, which again would be the description has to contain and only contain cable 2030, but then you can interchange where the two question marks are. You can interchange those digits, and then it must follow with a 01. So for instance, cable 2030 0101, 2030 0201, or 2030 0301. Now the same with the like, but this time you can have something before the word cable and after the 4 digits or characters that you might want to put there. So for instance, IP cable 2030, XP cable 2031, or WX cable 2032. Okay, now once you've set up the rule, you can then set up your defaults, and this is the magic. This is where RecXpress is, is powerful, and the ability to add your defaults per transaction code. And what will happen is, as you specify it, this will therefore be remembered month after month, So using RecXpress rules, you can set up the following default values: distribution code, GL account code, all your tax tracking details like tax type, tax group, tax class, tax inclusive, your entry description, distribution sets, AR customer, AP vendor, or your allocation methods for AR and AP. Okay, so with distribution sets, you will have one entry that comes from the bank, and you can then create a rule with that distribution set. By attaching the distribution set, RecXpress will automatically add all those lines. So when you create that batch, it will then have the multiple GL accounts. So let's look a little bit deeper into the AR and AP allocation, which is, it's quite powerful, So with the AP AR allocation, you can include the vendor or customer number. You would then have 4 different allocation types or allocation methods. No, which would be a prepay. Yes, which would allocate to the balance brought forward. And then you have equal amount and the document number. So here you will see at the top with our xide rule again, what we have there is first the compare method, which is like. So it will first look RecXpress will first look, okay, cool, there is Xide. So it will take that transaction and, sorry, again, go to meetings is just slightly in the way. Okay, it will take that transaction and it will say, okay, so this is an AP entry type. And what we want is for it to go and use the 1350 vendor. It will then go to AP, and what it will do is it will collect all the invoices that belong to that vendor, and it will almost do a like command to that invoice number. And once it finds that invoice number, which is IN 135092, it will then allocate to that amount against the it will then allocate the amount against that invoice. Wayne, can you help explain the equal amounts?
Yeah, I can actually. So what the rule will do here is pick up that it is an invoice, and we pick up, because of the compare method set to a like or contains whatever, that we've got the vendor name of Xide. So we'll go look in AP, look for Xide, bring up all the outstanding invoices, and then in your drop down in your graphic there, you've got the auto allocate. We've got the 3 different modes basically on how we're going to apply the statement amount to that document for that vendor. So obviously you can just choose to say no, and it'll just keep adding the statement amounts as prepayments to that vendor. Otherwise, if we say yes, it's going to allocate to the balance brought forward on that vendor for that document. If you choose to auto allocate by equal amount, it's going to search for an invoice for that vendor for that invoice number that has the exact amount of the statement coming in. Or if you choose document number, it's going to find the exact document number for that vendor and apply it to the outstanding balance. So in a nutshell, just the 3 or 4 different methods you can use to auto allocate for AP and AR.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Oh.
Cool.
Okay. So now, Az is just going to give us a brief overview on the flow of RecXpress.
So just before we do that, a question did come into the chat box around the rules template. Why would you have rules by customers? Shouldn't the deposits match the bank transactions?
Over to you, Natalie.
Oh gosh, I don't know, Wayne. Why we have you here?
Yeah, and so I must just clarify, I'm the programmer here, so the practical experience, I might not explain it properly, but you could have, if you're talking customers, you could have a deposit made that maybe had payments for multiple customers in the deposit, and we'd need to set up a rule to break down that deposit and to find the various customers that it was appropriate to apply to, using the rules, using the compare methods, and using the allocate mode, so that you can keep up your AR activity report can, obviously be current and reflective once you post the batch and you update AR. Same for AP. Is that any clearer? Okay, I'm going to take it as a yes.
I think so, Wayne.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Wayne. So what you're looking at is the flow chart. When you're bringing in your transactions from the bank, it goes through 3 different matchings. It either matches the entry perfectly for you with a transaction and bank services, or it's a no match, meaning there's nothing in bank services, or you could have a transaction that you brought in and you've entered it differently to the bank. While RecXpress will pick up the reference and match it with error. If it matches it properly, it can then match it by reference, by amount, more than one amount, or you can even have your own matching once it's brought it in. We call this many entries to one statement, or one statement to many entries. These kind of matchings mean it won't create it in the batch, it's already in bank services. With match with error, it will bring it in, find the entry and say, hold on, we've got a variance of maybe 1 cent or 5 cents. And it will allow you to create a variance of like a variance batch of the difference. It will use the same reference as matched with error. The last matching type is your no match. With no match, if you have correctly entered your rules, you should eventually have up to a 99% match and only a few entries will be in your no match. With no match entries, RecXpress will look for the rule within the categories, set up default values, let you renumber the entries before you can create the badge and then post it. So, a quick recap. No match creates the badge for you. Matched with error creates a variance badge for you, and matched just matches the entry. When you create the badge, you post the badge, and then you can post your reconciliation to bank services, and it will have done a proper recon and balance your bank. And that is the idea of RecXpress.
Great. Thank you, Az. So next what we have, and like we said we would show you, is the category maintenance. So in your RecXpress rules window, you will find next to category setup, your category maintenance. And this is once you've set up your categories, you're then able to move rules between categories, which is quite a useful tool and really helps you to clean up your categories quite easily. So for instance, here we have bank charges on one side, and then we want to move some of those transactions or those rules to deposits. So we have deposits on the other. We would highlight, for instance, service fee, and we would move it over to deposits using the arrow. Okay, so lastly, let's discuss the purpose of the other category. All entries that do not have rules go to other. You can then edit the transaction in other, setting up all the defaults. You then change the category where you want that rule to go, and RecXpress will prompt you to add the rule to that category. Once the rule has been added to the category, it will also prompt you to edit the rule. This is an opportunity to change the like command to be more generalized. So, for example, let's say you have some expenses and you get a coffee every day, but in different areas. So you get a Starbucks in Buckoven one day and a Starbucks in Takai the next. Now, for this rule, you wouldn't want to have it equal to. You'd use the common word, which would be, of course, Starbucks. Now, after adding the rule, you would run a refresh, and then each month thereafter, the transaction will not go to other, but it will go to the correct category that you have set up in that rule. Now, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to give you a little demo on how to use the category other. Now, let me just close this, and I don't want to save it. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to go into RecXpress. Like we've been saying throughout the demo, this data is, this training session, this data is available for you. Okay, now I've loaded our bank code CCB, and it uses the rules template sample. So now I've already imported the transactions, and it's now gone through our rules template, the sample rules template, and it's matched as much as it could using our existing rules, and it's matched it to the existing transactions in our in bank services. So now when I open RecXpress reconciliation, I'm first going to go to no match. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify the category other. And in the category other, you will see that we have multiple payments with a reference of OT, and then obviously the numbers afterwards are changing from 113, 114, etc. So I want to create a rule for all these payments. And like I said, the quickest way to do this is in category other. So first what I'm going to do, hold on. This happened to me earlier. You know, when you're looking at the screen, you can't see what you want. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the default values. So let's give it the distribution code of SD. That distribution code is already set up to have an account number. And then what I'm also going to do is make sure that it's auto numbering, but what I'm going to give the prefix as is FX. And now that all my defaults are set up and I'm happy with the defaults, I can now click into the category, change the category from other to Forex. And when I tab off, it will say You have changed the category from other to Forex. Do you want to add this entry to the category Forex in your rules template? And of course, that is what I want to do. Then it gives me the opportunity to specify, or rather generalize my rule a bit more. So do you want to edit? Yes, I do. So when I click yes, it then opens the rules template. And here you can see that it's brought in the default values that I entered. But now what I want to make more generalized is my like command, is my like compare method. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make the compare description just OT. You can add the other numbers, but you know, let's make it quite a general rule. And then I'm going to hit save. And when I close this window, it will do an auto refresh, but just on the first payment where I edited the category. So let me close it. Okay, there you can see the 113 payment has moved. Now, when I hit refresh here, all those payments, all those transactions will, the rule will be applied and they will all move to the Forex category. So when I select refresh, would you like to refresh? Yes, of course. Okay, and there you are. So now they've all moved out of the other. And when I go to Forex, there are all my payments. And now every month, if I have, you know, these transactions in every bank statement, RecXpress will know to take those specific payments with a reference of OT and put them into the Forex category. Okay. So let's do a quick recap. So what we discussed was the power of the rules, creating the template, and where do you start? Bank formats and transaction codes, creating a rules template, which you saw, you know, it uses the bank format, which we create for you unless they already exist. You then have your basic rules with your transaction codes, which come predefined from the bank. You then have all the compare methods, the equal, the like, the equal with a wild card, and then a like with a wild card. From there, you also have your categories, which is different to transaction types. Your categories is where you would put multiple transaction types. So your service fees, your bank charges, your Forex charges, you'd put those into the category bank charges. Then you have your auto numbering, which is a lovely feature where you can neaten up your bank services and ensure that all your references are unique. You then have your default values, which you can build up month to month using your rules, and it makes your reconciliation so much easier. And, you know, it really does become more and more automated as you go along. I think each month you'll build up your rules and all your default values, and eventually you're almost totally hands off. Then you have auto allocation to AR and AP, and then finally the category other, which is, you know, where you would create your rules, what we say is your rules on the fly. So yes, that is it. We will of course be sharing this presentation with everyone, which, you know, you can then go and you can take it to your clients and show them and go through the rules and the power of the rules and how you can automate your bank recon.
Thanks very much, Natalie. So we're going to open it up to questions now. So Susie, let's start with you. So Susie had the initial question, Wayne, around why you would set up customers. So she just wants clarification on if you enter your AR receipt and post it, then the deposit should match the bank statement. Does RecXpress presume no AR entries or AP entries ahead of time?
Just repeat the second part of that question, please, Nancy.
Does RecXpress presume?
Does AP or AR presume?
No AR entries or AP entries ahead of time. So in other words, yes, you can create those entries in AR and AP.
No. I'm gonna have to double check deeper than that. But if we create the entries, we're going to create basic bank entry defaults and not as a common bank entry and not directly into AP and AR. So for AP and AR, if they want to allocate to invoices from AP and AR, then we will handle that and we will go and update the activity per vendor, per customer to reflect correctly the balance allocated against it, and we'll match in bank services. But the no matches will go through as bank entries and will be posted as such.
Ultimately, though, up to AR and AP.
Ultimately, when you post it in bank services, it'll follow the normal path if you had entered it directly into bank services.
Right. So, Richard, does that answer your question as well?
Yeah, I saw Richard's question, and he's right. Bank rec, what did you say? I do not think bank rec touches AR customers or AP vendors. That's correct, but it will match to the bank statement payments and deposits in bank services, in Sage Bank Services, and then of course it will go. If you've set it up to auto allocate, it'll go and reflect in the APAR activity for those invoices.
Okay, when I did the RecXpress, I simply ran RecXpress. We had the Sage Bank Rec. And what it did, once you ran the RecXpress, it updated the reconciliations in that bank rec. RecXpress itself,
Yes.
the only posting it did is if I created the bank entry in RecXpress.
Yes, correct. And
Okay.
but when we post our recon, if it needs to auto allocate, if it's picking up AR or AP, it will go and update the AP obs and AR obs to reflect the correct activities. But yeah, only when you post the recon, then it will start reflecting correctly in bank services itself.
Okay. The part where you can basically, I think you're saying we're going to enter a deposit in RecXpress, and at that point it could go do whatever it does in payables or receivables. But with Sage 300, it's all done. Like we've got all of that finished up. The RecXpress is to help us speed up the matching with the Sage Rec. There's no ARAP involvement.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just a little bit confused.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. If you like, Richard, we can come back to you on that. I can get more clarity. Just to dig a little bit deep on it. I don't want to. Yeah.
No.
Natalie, we'll just take a note of that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay, and Corey has a question. So go ahead, Corey.
Sorry, I hit send before I was going to type in the question. But anyways, the question was when it reaches out to AR and AP to either match up those transactions, does it create the entry only in the batch, or does it actually post that as well?
Sorry, Natalie, correct me if I'm wrong. It will post the in AP and AR as well. Otherwise, in order to update the activity, so we will go find the document and post to AP and AR accordingly.
Yes.
Okay, so
we have an option for that.
Is there a way to just create the entry and not post it, or it just basically drives that completely through?
We have an option for that, Natalie. I'm just looking for it now as we are talking about it. I need to just log into another company. Sorry, everyone. Let me just give me a moment.
Isn't that part
I'm just
of
glad we
the?
had Wayne on the call with us.
Yeah, isn't it part of the RecXpress options post automatically in bank services AP and AR?
Correct. I was actually correct. 100%, Nancy. I was just looking for the correct wording. So in the RecXpress setup options, you can choose to post automatically in bank services AP and AR, just as you said it.
Okay, so just to clarify, so that's not checked off, that it'll create the entry just and not post it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's what I wanted. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, are there any other
Thank you, Wayne.
questions? Okay, if there's no other questions, then thank you very much for joining us. As I said at the top, I'm going to post this recording on our YouTube channel, so I will send you all a follow-up email with a link to that video on YouTube. And otherwise, I'd like to thank Natalie and Wayne and Azza for joining us from Parasoft and doing this presentation for us today. Thanks very much.
Thank you
everyone.
so much, Nancy. Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah,
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Nancy.
yeah. Thank you, Nancy. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, you as well.
Goodbye, everyone.
I'm sure, yeah, we will do more and get better at them. Thank you, Nancy. Practice makes
problem.
perfect.
No problem at all. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks.
And I
Cheers.
guess
Bye.
it's evening
Bye.
for you guys, so have a good evening.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, evening.
All right, take
Bye.
care.
Bye.
Bye.